Hello, my little Luxes. Welcome back to another Luxy Charms, and I am your host, Tressie Lux. And today I am continuing my series for covering the Masters of horror series. And this series first initially came out in 2005, and it lasted for 2 seasons. Now, I am slowly going through this, and I just started this about 5-6 months ago. So I am only on episode 6. So today's episode, I am covering Homecoming, and director was Joe Dante, and writers were Mick Garris and Sam Hamm, and also technically Dale Bailey. So it's a readaptation to Dale Bailey's original short story. Now, I'm just going to jump right into this one, so spoiler alert, and also viewer discretion is advised.
Marty, this is a baseless, cheap smear. This is despicable.
Now, this episode is a dark comedy. In fact, for Joe Dante, he's very well known for mixing horror and humor together. So this one is just down that same line. It is one of those where he's taking a parody of something that is going on in real life. And there is a war going on, and it is supposed to be the 2008 election. Now, mind you, the fact that if we're looking at history and knowing from what was going on at that time, that in 2005, Bush was our president, we had the war that was going on because of 9/11 and everything that went on. But by that point in time, people were getting fed up with the war. So it doesn't surprise me about how Joe Dante had shown in his interpretation, and also Mick Garris and Sam Hamm were taking this story and relating it to what was going on with current events. So this one is right up the alley of comparing history and horror movies together and seeing how what was going on for current events was also being shown in horror. Now, I'll get more into the fact that how ironic was it for the fact that I was watching this episode during election week, because I watched this last week, did all my notes and that, and I also didn't feel like covering this one right away during election weeks. So, and plus I wanted to cover the Critters Attack one anyway. Anyway, let's carry on. So the story focuses on David Murch, who is a political writer and consultant for the president for the conservative side, and because of the fact that the idea that the president he worked for at the time, kind of a weird spin on the fact that he looked like Clinton, but his voice clearly mimicked how Bush would speak.
I suffer when I see those numbers every day. I see them before you do.
But what political writer David Murch finds out is that sometimes your wishes do come true, but that also means you have to be very careful for what you wish for. So what happens is that David is invited onto this political TV show, and while he is a guest on there, a grieving mother who had just lost her son to the war was also brought on to ask questions. And her main question was, what did my son die for? And that nobody could answer her, including the president. So David, being moved by this woman and also having true heartfelt feelings himself, since his brother had been a part of the Vietnam War and had also passed away during the war, he starts off by saying, if I had one wish, I would wish that your son could come back. And like I said, at first his words were so heartfelt, and he was even teary-eyed, and he was feeling for the mother. But being the fact that he is a political consultant, quickly had to jump back and realize what had happened, and he switched up his words and basically said to the mother, and that her son would come back and say how important this war and this struggle truly was. Now, obviously, with the tactic in that, he's freaking out, thinking that he'd messed up, but the president ends up contacting them and saying that it was brilliant, a wonderful tactic that he had used. So the president, because it was during the time of an election year, he wanted to use the same idea, the same thing for his speech for doing his campaigns. Well, he was the current president at the time. So for his campaign, he does the same thing like with David, where he said, if I had one wish, and carries on with the whole idea of the soldiers coming back so that they could tell us what they truly felt about their cause towards the war and the struggle. After the president uses this, a part of his speech, strange supernatural things end up happening. Turns out, dead soldiers start rising from the graves. However, these zombies don't come back to eat your brains. No, no, no. In fact, they have very political reasons for why they decided to come back. They decide that they want their voices to be heard and they want to vote for the current election. Now, mind you, at first, the current political party loves this idea that, oh, they're going to get more votes and everything. So they start campaigning and saying how important it is for these zombies to be heard and that their vote matters, even though a bunch of people were stating the facts of once they're dead, they are purged from the system and they're not allowed to vote. But they argue the idea of they are undead. They're not dead. So let them have a say. But as things usually end up happening, when the current administration finds out that when these zombies are voting, they're not voting for the current president. They're voting for the other guy because he wants to end the war. And all of the zombies start saying that they died for a lie and that they wanted somebody in power that was going to make a change and somebody that was actually going to end the unnecessary war.
We'll vote for anyone who ends this evil war.
So, after finding out that the undead soldiers were not going to vote for the current president, what ends up happening? They start changing their tune and they start saying, oh, well, these zombies have no right to vote. Even though they were questioned about the fact that earlier they had said that it was fine, but since they know they're not going to get the votes from the undead soldiers, of course they're going to backtrack. Of course they're going to say, oh, well, they can't vote because they're dead. They're purged from the system. So they keep playing this game and they keep trying to twist the narrative so that it worked in their favor. So then they start trying to make these poor dead soldiers out to be the enemy and that they have to be rounded up and they have to be purged. What ends up happening when it comes to zombies, they start using force to get their way and saying that you have to let us vote. You have to let us have our say. To where, yes, they end up finally letting the zombies all go and make a vote, because if they went and voted as soon as they were done and turned their ballots in, they would pass away again. Granted, yes, they were dead to begin with, but they are dead again. However, as soon as the current administration starts quickly finding out during the voting that the zombies were voting against them and that they were going to lose, they start messing with everything. And they make it to where the votes from the zombies don't count. So because of this, and not counting the votes, and them clearly stating we can do whatever we want in this situation, the current president at that time ends up winning. Well, because of the fact that they were lying and that they thought they were going to cheat the zombies, all of the zombie soldiers start rising from their graves. Not just the ones that were from the Iraq War. It was all of them now were rising from the grave. Because before it was just the Iraqi soldiers that were rising to make the vote. Now it's all of them. From the Vietnam, from World War I and II, the Civil War, they were all rising up out of anger for what their country had done, and were going up against the political parties. So they all rise and join together for the same cause. They wanted to seek revenge. So they announced that if more fellow soldiers, their brothers and sisters in arms, if they continued to die for a lie, that they would show their enemies the true face of hell.
It was just a game.
We hoped you'd forget.
So I kind of talked about the fact that this episode was definitely going to hit me in a different way than all the other previous episodes I'd watched. And like I said, it's just ironic how everything is falling together with the fact that how was it that I ended up watching this episode during the week of election for 2024? And this is talking about the one back in 2008. Now, granted, we know which president was the one that won in 2008, but back in 2005, they didn't know that Obama was going to be running for president or anything like that, which is why their comedic stance of using a parody mimicked voice of Bush. And of course, if you grew up with him as president, we know the exact tone and voice that was used. Also, the fact that I am recording this today on Veterans Day. So I'm like, okay, I don't want to talk about politics. I am exhausted when it comes to politics. I am drained. But it's like, what a weird coincidence. Is this ironic? Is this... I don't know. But I'm so exhausted and drained when it comes to politics. And having it be this episode was so telling to me, where it's like, this one was a very heartfelt... Yes, it was comedic. Yes, it was dark humor. It was more on the comedic side than it really was on the horror side. Not scary, not really. And this episode was also extremely moving. There were moments in there that were so heartfelt, where you had the fact that when they started making these zombies out to be the enemy, that you had people that were still reaching out to them and trying to help them and trying to help them in their cause and believed in them. And I mean, it kind of gave you those feelings of, unfortunately, what had happened during Nazi times when it came to the Holocaust and everything. You still had good people out there that were hiding these people from the German Nazis and everything. It was taking elements from history and putting it into that, to where you were seeing the political party lying through their teeth and manipulating things so that it would benefit them. So at the same time, this episode also makes me extremely sad. It makes me sad because we're still asking these questions. Why does this keep happening? Why do we feel like we're always being lied to? And why are things not getting better? And it also shows that we're still asking the same questions over and over again. We're still questioning our administration when it comes to voting, and is it fair? Are they rigging things? That whole concept was the whole idea of that, where they flat out were saying, we can do whatever we want. If we want votes to disappear, votes can disappear. Vice versa. If they want them to be there, they can be there. Obviously, this is just a show, but it's still the idea these questions are there, and they've always been there. And obviously, people are questioning it now. They were questioning it 4 years ago, the previous one. So why? Why does this keep happening? And it's frustrating. And why do we always feel like we're being lied to by our political parties? And I don't care which side you are on, it feels like they both are lying. Because let's face it, yes, we're supposed to have third parties, but we don't. We have two parties that are the main focus. And I don't know about any of you, but I am tired of feeling like I'm voting for the lesser of two evils. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. And I feel like all of you are tired of it too. Why do I always feel like we're being lied to about everything? Why? does it always feel like this for every election now? And it feels like it gets worse, not better. They're playing the blame game, a blame game that I don't want to play anymore. I want out of this political conundrum that is just a never-ending cycle of us, the people, feeling like we're losing. We're losing in something that we are never, ever going to benefit from.
He's not stupid. He has a way of making stupid people feel like they're just as smart as he is.
So I recommend watching this episode, going into it with the thought process and the idea that this is, yes, a parody, but it's also got a lot of elements of truth to it as well. And Joe Dante does an excellent job of portraying the voice that he wants to get out there. And Mick Garris and Sam Hamm do an excellent job of retelling Dale Bailey's original short story for this adaptation. And it's one of those things where it's like all the other ones, where I'd love to get my hands on the original work, the original short story, to see and compare. Just, this is an important episode. It really is. And I really like this episode, but it also made me extremely sad. It makes me sad about our current situation. And I'm tired of feeling sad. I'm tired of feeling tired. I'm tired of feeling angry about what's going on. And it doesn't matter which political side you are on. First comes first, I'm an American, and I want to believe in the American people. I don't care about what political party is in office. I just want them to have the best interest for the American people. I want them to have the best interest for me. I want them to have the best interest for you. That's what I want. I think I'm just gonna end this episode with David's words from the show, where towards the end of the episode, he had said, "You don't treat other people's lives as a game."
I'd forgotten, all right. Mainly, I forgot that you don't treat other people's lives as a game.
And like I said, I think I'm just gonna end it right there. Those are important words to think about, and that in the end, I hope that we can all just be there for one another, and that we need to stop fighting amongst each other, because it's not benefiting any of us. And on the screen, you can see a shout out to my fellow Patreon members. Thank you so much for joining me on my Patreon and for becoming the afterlife of the party. And a special shout out to my Ultimate Luxes. So thank you so much to Kurt, Chris Bruner, and Bishop. Thank you so much for joining me and becoming an Ultimate Lux.